All right. Hey, what up, Masters? Welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery podcast. Today we're with Don Lazari. Don, how are you today, sir?
Couldn't be better. Just returned from a week at the beach.
Good. I love hearing that. Florida too, which is really nice and nice
Yeah.
beaches. Good for you. And so Don is a sales performance or sales performance consulting or coach. Are you a consultant or both?
It's kind of both. It just depends on how the engagement goes. Sometimes I work directly with the CEO,
Okay.
kind of behind the scenes, like the Wizard of Oz. At other times, I'm participating in fractional sales management and weekly meetings or whatnot. It just depends on the engagement.
Okay, got it. And you were the author of the Entrepreneur's Sales Secrets Revealed book that provides a curated collection of sales knowledge and insights successful entrepreneurs have applied to scale their business and drive growth. So you have a large resume here, so I'm not going to read through everything, but I
Sure.
will let you give us a few more points. Like, tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you've done, and why should our listeners even listen to you today, Don?
That's fair. I mean, why should you buy?
Sure,
Why should you listen? Well,
that's
first
right.
first of all, my almost my entire career has been in sales and predominantly selling new technologies into a diverse amount of markets. So I started selling into manufacturing, then we were selling advanced analytics into logistics, the federal government, et cetera. And then I ended up doing the same, selling healthcare technology. And that's both North America, Europe. So great experiences when it came to that. The latter part of that was leading teams. The former part of that, of course, was just out there being a rep, doing what you're supposed to do, hitting your number and making your calls. So
Yeah, though it's interesting. I used to run I still own a real estate brokerage, but I used to run a big team within a real estate brokerage, and I found it was a lot different being a salesperson than somebody that can actually effectively lead a team of people, right?
it's an
Like,
entirely different skill set. Yes.
yeah. And so, like, were you one of the type? Were you just good at it from the beginning? Because to be honest, I was not. Like, I've been great at sales my whole life, but when it came to like leading other people, it
Sales
was
leadership? Oh no, you have to scrape your knees a few times in sales leadership.
yeah.
It is a transformation because to me, as soon as I got my first sales job, I thought, oh, this is my place in the sun.
Yeah.
Leadership is a horse of a different color.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to get into your book today. We're going to talk about your book, Entrepreneur Sales Secrets. And the other thing that I really wanted to get into were the three most common mistakes that entrepreneurs, salespeople make regarding selling and the sales process. But before I even get into that, I want to know what makes you a great salesperson.
I think what made me a very successful salesperson was the fact that my undergraduate degree was in writing. So I was trained as a nonfiction writer. And the thing that you get trained at the most when it comes to that is interviewing people and asking a lot of questions to drive out a compelling story
Mm.
and then being able to relay that to different types of audiences. And I found as soon as I got into a sales job that that's exactly what I was doing, except I was effectively doing it on my feet. So
Mm.
that ability, and that's a bit of advice if you want to talk about three most common selling mistakes. Don't enter a room mouth first. Don't come through there just talking about your product and talking about your company. You need to ask insightful questions, and you need to keep asking those. So it's almost like an interview as to whether or not you're interviewing the client, as to whether you can deliver value to them.
Mm.
And you need to take that approach. I frankly think that's what made me successful in selling was I went out of my way to understand what was their compelling reason to buy. And if you can get to that, then you can start to build your approach around things that relate to that compelling reason to buy. And so when the time came to close, it was almost like it was a successful conclusion because you talked to the client, You understood their problem. You were able to relate what your solution was doing to their problem. And at that point, if they're shaking their head, it's time to ask for the order.
Mm.
So that's what I attribute it to.
So to break that down, what I'm hearing is you're really good at asking questions and figuring out what people's challenges are, right, or what their goals are, and then helping them discover, like, are you the solution to that, or how do you get someone, like, I get that part, but how do you get someone to say, okay, let's move forward?
Well, what you start doing is you relate things directly back to what their compelling reason to buy is, and keep relating it back to that. You've got to connect the dots between what your offer is and how it impacts them in three different ways. How it impacts them from a personal basis. If it's a larger organization, how it impacts them from a political basis. And then, of course, the most obvious, how does it impact them from a business basis? What's it going to do to help them in the business? But people buy for more reasons than just logical business reasons. You're well aware of that, I'm sure.
Sure.
And so I think you need to consider all three of those facets.
Yeah, because I mean, so creating the story is also what I heard, and putting them in the story. But when you have a group of executives, I'm guessing that's a lot more difficult to accomplish, right?
No question. And that's kind of the third leg to the stool here, which is you win by building consensus and understanding who else is at the table and what their needs are and what they're looking to do. Are you familiar with a technique called power mapping?
No, I'm not.
Okay, great. It's an awesome way to look at a multi-stakeholder deal. And a large majority of the stuff that I sold throughout my career and with the teams that I led were multi-stakeholder. So let's use a specific example. The very last team, and I've been doing consulting for 15 years. So the very last team that I led, we were selling into healthcare, into nursing homes. So you had to convince the owner of the business. You had to convince clinical. You had to convince finance. You had to convince compliance. And you had to convince a number of other folks that would be at the table. And relating this back to, why do you think you were so good at selling? It's because I could understand what the value prop was, and I could relate it to all of those different groups. And you've got to do that. So with power mapping, what you do is you go through a thought process of, at the end of the day, there is a single approver. And that approver is the person with veto power. So typically in skilled nursing, that was the owner, because it was his money that was getting spent, right? So you got an approver, you've got a project lead who's effectively taking responsibility for solving the business problem. And then you have a group of people that influence what that decision should be. And what you do is you put them in a grid and you look at what sort of organizational power do they have. And that could be none all the way up to significant. If I'm the approver, it's significant because I have veto power. You want to look at whether or not they support you, whether or not, and that can be all the way from advocates against to advocates for in the spectrum. And then do you have a cadence with them? Is there a rhythm? And then do you understand what their compelling reason to buy is? And when you put that out on a grid and you begin to look at things, so anything that's in your favor is green. Anything that is neutral, yellow. Anything where you don't know or they're advocating against you is red. And you get a picture of where you stand at that point in the deal, which will point you to, oh, well, David Hill's the CFO. Right now, I don't have much contact with him. I don't understand if he supports me. I really don't understand what his power is in this sale. And it leads you to those things that are going to get you to consensus. Because consensus, like I said at the beginning of this, consensus wins. It's not about selling to the power players anymore.
So I want you to tell us more about cadence. You said being cadence a rhythm with them. What do you mean by that?
Well, like you've got an ongoing dialogue. So if I've got a project lead, I should have somewhat of a good level of access to that individual in that sales situation. And I want to be able to have regular communication with them because that allows me to keep up with the heartbeat of the deal. But with some people, you're not necessarily going to have that. And you want to initiate it if you don't, or do your best to initiate it. And if you have it, you want to try to extend it. And in my opinion, the way to do that is once you understand the different stakeholders, you've got to relate other customer successes that address their need as part of the conversation, even if it's a contrived conversation. You know, going back to what you were saying before, if you were the CFO, I might reach out to you and say, hey, David, I thought you'd like to know that at the British home outside of Chicago, they were able to get another $25 per resident per day on their Medicare reimbursement, right? That's going to be something that's going to make me raise my eyebrows. On the clinical side, I might not care about that as much.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to plug that in. But in order to do that, you've got to have a dialogue. And if you're really doing a good job, you've got an ongoing dialogue with darn near everyone on that chart, even the approver. Now, clearly, the approver is the hardest one to get the dialogue with. And some of them purposely keep you at arm's length.
Unknown caller.
But that's really what it's about.
Yes, I mean it's very similar to like, for instance, owning a real estate brokerage. I meet with owners of homes, and so you're meeting with a husband and a wife, and typically one of them is more of the decision maker, but yet the other person's approval or opinion is critically important. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of real estate agents may miss, the fact that, oh, hey, I'm dealing with a decision maker and I kind of leave out this person.
Yeah, that person could be an influencer with significant influence, right? So if the wife's kind of leading the charge, but the husband's sitting back, the husband could be sitting there going, after they leave, I'm not so sure about this, honey. And let's not forget, to use that example, there are other stakeholders at the table too, especially if they're teenagers. They're going to influence the decision as well. And you got to think about that, right?
How's the teenager influence?
Oh, I don't want to leave my school. I'm going to be miserable. You know, that's often part of the thought process, right? Do I want to uproot my kids?
So that makes sense as far as the selling process, but I was actually referring to like the process of hiring you, but I guess they could say like, I don't like that guy, right? I didn't like the way that guy, right? That could, I guess, play into it as well, but that's
not what I meant.
Got it. All right, let's talk about your book, man. Tell us what is the essence of the book, Entrepreneur Sales Secrets Revealed?
Well, for the past 15 years, I've been working with a large variety of companies, more than 50, and working on, typically starting with the CEO to help them build out the business and unlock the growth that they're looking for. And what I noticed was there are common thought processes and patterns and misconceptions and perspectives that just began to just cut across the years and the markets. And so several years ago, I thought it's time for me to put this all together into one spot and share it to a broader audience beyond just my clients. But, I see some, very, very common approaches. You can call them mistakes if you like, that are just amazing how consistent they are across clients, especially if it's a company that's 3-4 million that wants to go to 5 or 10, or 10 that wants to go to 20. The CEOs are still pretty actively involved in the day-to-day. And it's interesting to see the continued patterns. And to be more specific, what I often see when I get into an engagement, it's a lack of a well-defined sales message. In the book, we talk about the big three, which is what do you want people to remember about what you're selling? because most people go in and it's just a potpourri of features.
Yeah.
And that's not how you're going to get to it. You need to frame those. So going back to my senior care example, the big three there was better reimbursement, better documentation, better reimbursement, better care. So we could tell the story of what we could do to all of the stakeholders within those three main points. A lot of companies don't get there. And those three main points are benefits. Those are not features. And often I'll see people going out and making points on features or their functionality when really that's not what people are looking to do. They're trying to solve a business problem. So
yeah, give us an example like for feature versus benefit.
Well, often what I'll hear is we're a cloud-based solution with advanced AI that can have this processing speed of X, Y, Z. It's like performance metrics and features and whatnot. And the client on the other side, I'll coach people and just say, do you really think someone's sitting there going, boy, what I need to solve this problem is a cloud-based solution with advanced AI that has all these bells and whistles? I'm like, no, what they're sitting there and going, how can I get another 5% in customer satisfaction? That's the real difference right there, right? You want to sell into the benefit. Now, it's okay to talk about the AI when you talk about how it improves that customer service, but the bell of the ball is not the functionality of the product. The bell of the ball is how your product solves the problem. And I see that commonly. I also see the thought that their solution is self-evident, that it's just so evident to the customer. We should just be able to demo and close. And of course, it never works that way, right? And so you've got to connect those dots, which gets back to the earlier thing we were talking about. If you ask good, insightful questions, you can actually connect those dots a whole lot more readily.
Yeah. It just reminds me of something that happened about 5 months ago. We needed a new website platform CRM for my brokerage, and I had talked to this guy, and he had a decent product. It was not expensive. It was a couple $100 a month, and I talked to a couple others. I ended up going with this product called Lofty, which is it's not the cheapest. It's 3 times more than this guy's product. So anyway, when he followed up to me, it was interesting because what he said to me was, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you went with Lofty. It's like so much more expensive." Like in his mind, he just didn't get at all the fact that it had nothing to do with cost for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? In his mind, it was all about the price. Like, oh wow. And I was like, yeah, it just kind of helped me solve the. I mean, I wasn't gonna start teaching him sales and right and consulting and coaching unless I guess I could have offered him. Maybe he could have hired me, but I didn't think of that. I was just kind of moving. But
sure.
Like, how common is that where people really think, hey, it's just about price or right?
All the time, people think it's about price or that it's a feature fight, and it's not. It's not. It goes back to something we were talking about earlier. People buy for one or two reasons. There's always a compelling reason to buy. And you've got to drive out what that is. And it's not, hey, why is it that you're looking for this solution? You've got to just continue to ask those questions until you fully understand, oh, the real reason they're looking for this is X, Y, Z. And then once you get to that point, then you've got a platform that you can sell from. And most folks don't go there. It's a feature fight, or it's all about specs and functionality. I worked for Rock Automation for a little while, and that's what it would be. They would just grid things out, and I never sold that way because it was in the margin for the people who were signing the checks.
Yeah. I know the big mistake I see is we salespeople tend to sell based on like you said, features, but also they have like a template presentation that is like the same for everybody, and it's just it's not it's yeah it's it doesn't resonate with a lot of people.
Right.
No.
And you want to kill a deal pretty quickly, or at least put the drag sheet on it. Spend 10 minutes talking about your company at the very beginning in your presentation.
Yeah, no one cares.
No one cares.
Yeah.
And I try to tell people that all the time.
They don't care. Yeah.
The customer problem is front and center. And then once they care, then you can tell them about your company. Until then,
Yeah.
no.
Well, it's like the real estate. So a lot of our listeners are real estate agents. Don, I don't know if you knew that or not, but so one of the biggest mistakes is they all talk about how many homes they sold last year, or this or that, or their production, or they get awards, and nobody cares. Like, right? It's like, yeah. But I think, like you said, though, after there is a point where, okay, it's important that you understand my neighborhood, you've got some experience, but I think most of them just lead with that, thinking people are going to be impressed and they're going to hire them because.
Yeah. Well, for recent experience for me, and with my girlfriend, a lot of real estate agents just go, well, here's the MLS for homes that are in your range. Tell me which ones you'd like to go see. How often do you see a real estate agent? I've never had this happen until I saw it happen with my girlfriend, who sits down and basically does a consultative sell.
Yeah.
So tell me, what is it that you're looking for? What's important to you? If you had to make a choice between a better kitchen or a bigger yard, what would your choice be? What would your trade up? You just don't see that. And if you can get to that, and people begin to be convinced that you understand fully what they're looking for, your credibility goes up dramatically.
All right, let's do this. Give me the three most common mistakes. I'm gonna write them down. You mentioned one earlier, but
okay. So 3 most common mistakes for a sales rep, or for a solopreneur who's selling, or for an entrepreneurial company. I can answer in 3 different ways.
Let's say for a sales rep.
Okay.
First, to simplify our listeners right now.
For a sales rep, one, we've already touched on this. Especially if you're selling technology, don't think your value is self-evident. You have to explain why you're providing value to that customer and to what it is that they're searching for, whether that be a business solution, whether that be a person buying a house. Don't think that your value is self-evident. You have to demonstrate it. And the best way to demonstrate it is by telling customer stories. And most people don't. Beautiful. Most people talk about their stuff. People want to hear, how have other people like me had a similar good experience or solved a similar business problem? Right?
Well, yeah.
2, never
on that one. It's funny because I recently had, because we're looking for new insurance and health insurance, which is I can't believe how much it's gone up. But anyway, regardless of that, a rep actually said, well, hey, you're the guy, like, you requested information from me, almost like I was being difficult because I kept asking him questions about the insurance. Like, so again, it comes to your point, like, don't think your value is so self-evident, because I need more information. Just because I went to somebody's site and put my information in doesn't mean I know everything about health insurance.
Yeah. When I'm working with reps, I always say that you've got to understand the dynamic that your client is always going to have an incomplete understanding of what your solution can do, period. Even after they've bought it, you're always going to understand more. So it's your job, and this is something that I learned when I worked for Rockwell. Your job as a salesperson is to paint the dream of the future state. What's the future going to look like? And I thought that was really sage advice, because most people don't. It's very transactional. Yeah. And you can't be transactional.
All right. So number 1 is, don't think your value is self-evident.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to come in here with curiosity. You have to really, as a matter of fact, I would I would challenge to think they have no idea about what your value is, right?
Or they know this much.
Yeah, a little tiny bit.
And it's probably such an incomplete understanding that it's not to your advantage yet. Right?
Okay.
That's got to be developed and opened.
That's really good. Number 2.
Understand how risky you are, both as a salesperson, because most people look at salespeople with a jaundiced eye. So what you've got to do is you've got to reduce that risk just from a personal basis. And we've already talked about that. How do you do that? You sit down and start asking insightful questions. And by doing that, you drive credibility. So that's one. That's going to reduce risk.
Let's dig deeper on that. What do you mean by risk? Like what?
Well, I mean, people are going to be looking at, can I really trust Don?
Got it. Okay.
How do I know?
Okay.
What is that? I'm tired of people, just salespeople coming in here and just, throwing a bunch of stuff at me without even really trying to understand, right? Can I trust them? Okay. I do. When I do an opening workshop with a new client sales team, I always say, what's the one thing a salesperson needs in order to be able to sell that you cannot do without? And I'll go around the room. You need product knowledge. You need to be able to know how to close. You need to be able to whatever.
Right? I think I know what it is.
Right? And at the end of the day, I just say, no, the one thing you need is credibility. Okay. Because if you don't have credibility, you can have all those other things and they're not going to buy from you. So you've got to understand that. And secondarily, if you're selling a new offering, whether it's a new real estate offering or it's a new technology offering, there's risk there too because you're new. A quote that I use pretty often is from Jeff Bezos from the early days of Amazon. And he said, "We are pioneers and the record of pioneers is not that good." And I think you got to remember that, right? And a lot of technology CEOs and a lot of technology salespeople are just like, we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And people are just going to come in here and they're just going to buy it. And they put together a business plan that goes like this. Whoosh. And then, of course, reality sets in, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I love it. Credibility. I was going to say trust. But I think they kind of go together, right?
They go together, right? If you're credible, they're going to trust you.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like people have to feel some sense of trust. And that's such a great point, though. You're right. Because salespeople don't always think about like, hey, how's this person perceiving me? Or even what is their perception of a salesperson, right? Because a lot of people, they get that old Glenn Ross, that, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but one thing that can definitely rub me the wrong way is when I get in a selling situation with a salesperson that wants to, take the Zig Ziglar approach.
What do you mean? What's a Zig Ziglar?
I'm Mr. Prospect.
Zig's awesome, man. What do you mean?
Oh, I love him. I love him, but it's typically poorly executed.
Yeah,
right.
Because they're not Zig. They don't have Zig.
They're not Zig. They're not Zig.
But give us an example of that, though. Since you brought it up.
Well, I mean, a great example. I'm looking for windows for my house. So I have a guy that comes in and he starts running me through what I'd consider to be a very, I don't want to say manipulative, but if someone's not aware of what's going on, they're going through a shtick. And, it's and just like you said, it's a standard shtick. And I just had a gen in. I'm not going to mention the company. He was actually a great guy, but he started down that line. And I just said, all right, time out. Let's have a discussion here. Okay. Let's dispense with all of the little trial closes and techniques you're doing here and whatnot. I've had a career in sales and actually I've written a book about it. So let's just shoot straight with each other. And it was interesting what happened because all of that fell to the floor because he was trained to come in and go, oh, our double hung windows are, and he's doing this and doing that and taking you through the sample book and the whole 9 yards. But doing that, Don, if we could get to a color that suits you, do you think you could make a decision today? That type of kind of old school, non-consultative 1970s selling style.
Doesn't work anymore. Yeah.
That dog just doesn't hunt anymore.
Do you remember Tom Hopkins? Did you know Tom
Oh
Hopkins?
yeah.
Tom was awesome. You know what? I learned back in the day, 36 years in sales. I used to drive around and listen to Tom Hopkins, and I'll tell you that stuff worked. I don't know if it's going to work anymore, but it worked back then.
It worked back then. Listen, I listened to Earl Nightingale and Brian Tracy.
Yeah, Brian Tracy was on my podcast.
I know. You know what? I was searching for it and I couldn't. I had trouble finding it. So
yeah, great guy. I listen to a lot of his stuff too. All right. Anyway, number 3. What's the third one? I know.
Number 3, you got to sell value using client success.
Don't
say, we've done an ROI calculation and you're going to get a return of 10 times your investment. No. Because they're not going to believe you, especially if the CFO's in the room. But if you can go in and say, we did this for organization XYZ, and they saw a 15% uptick in their decrease in their cost of returns. And then at this client, we were able to help them get 17% more productivity out of their warehouse. So you've got to sell using those customer successes. And when I get involved with entrepreneurial companies, I often see a real lack of that voice of the customer. And, I talk about that in the book. That is, they literally are gold to you, especially in the early days. Because, going back to our early point, which comes directly from our friend Jeffrey Moore, people buy to solve business problems in the fat of the market. And so you've got to relate the solution of business problems to what you're offering to that client.
And the other side of that is salespeople need to become, and that was the thing about Zig. Actually, Zig was a great storyteller.
Yes.
Right. Like one of the best, if not the best, I've heard. And so I think being a great, and you're right, he did have some of the closes and all that, which is obvious. That's worked back. That was based on that time. It worked. Roll the pencil across the table, they pick it up, and right. But the stories are still critically important when you become a really great storyteller. Would you agree with that? Like
no question. There's a book that I read back. Oh Lord!
I don't know if you have a buzzing. Is that you?
Probably in the 90s.
Is that your phone or something buzzing there?
No, my phone's off.
No, interesting. Or maybe it's mine. All right. Anyway, sorry about that.
But it was, and I forget the name of the gent that read it. I'd have to pull it off of my bookshelf back behind me. But it was called Heavy Hitter Selling. And what this guy did was he'd made a bunch of money in .com, and he was sitting around in airports watching the salespeople that were there, and really got an interest in what makes them tick, and what separates the really good ones from the rest of the fold. And one of his primary principles was you should sell using vignettes. You should tell a story instead of just saying, oh, this customer got 1, 2, 3. You go in and say, yeah, when we first got involved with the David Hill Company, they were experiencing some frustrations with this, that, and the other. Their rate of return was high, et cetera, et cetera. You kind of set the stage. And then we got involved, and after a 6-month period, it's that whole painting the picture of the future state, right? The dream of the future state. That to me is fundamental. The best salespeople, they tell those stories. And those stories relate directly to what the client's looking for.
Oh, because they can feel it. Like, oh my God, that's what I'm dealing with right now. Like they don't say that, but you can see it in there.
Oh yeah. And the takeaway for businesses is you've got to pay close attention to what I refer to as those lighthouse accounts. You've got to look for them. You got to foster those relationships. You've got to maintain those relationships. And if you're really good, you're going to have a catalog of them.
Lighthouse accounts.
Uh-huh.
What does it tell us?
They basically shine the light on the value that
Got
your
it.
product delivers or your solution delivers and show other the way to the value. So
Mm.
lighthouse.
Yeah, I have this story. It's 7 Lakeside Ave in Shrewsbury, and the guy was selling his house himself. And a friend of mine told me about the sign. I called. I just and so when I call a for sale by owner now, I don't just say, "Hey, it's David Hill. Do you want to list your house with me? I can save you some commission money." I just share the story. Hey, are you familiar with 7 Lakeside Ave in Shrewsbury? Yeah, I know the area. Great. I want, and then it's like magic.
Yeah.
And I just probably give like the realtors that listening to this are like gonna be like, holy cow, like it's such a difference, Don.
It's a huge difference.
The approach, and people listen to you, like they want to know that, they want to hear that. Okay, what about that property?
Yeah, I'd actually like to talk to that person. That's really
Yeah.
what you want to hear, right?
Yeah.
Especially the Lighthouse account. You know what? Can I talk to them?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. All right. What did I miss?
Well, I think that what we might want to wrap up with is the fact that you've really got to establish credibility. You've really got to focus on having a selection of customer successes that are out there that you can go to talk about your value. And you've got to remember that the key to winning in sales, in my opinion, the square one is starting with insightful questions and keep asking. I led a sales team back in the late 90s, and that's back when people would just show up and crack open their laptops and go. And it was all about PowerPoint, and I'd challenge them if I was on a call with them. I want to see how long you can go without opening that laptop. So, and if you can spend, if you have an hour, you can spend 40 minutes asking questions, 5 minutes presenting, and then, your additional 5 minutes just getting feedback because you've already understood their situation. If you're not doing that, you're missing the mark. That's fundamental.
Agreed.
Absolutely fundamental.
All right. How do our listeners get a copy of your book?
You can get it from my website, deliveringvalue.com. It's also on Amazon. If you go to my LinkedIn page, you'll see some folks that have recommended it. Those links are out there. So those are the easiest ways to do it.
All right, perfect. And anything else, I think we had a great conversation. Give us the one, so we talked about the sales rep, but let's give one more. What's the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make?
Well, I don't know if this is the biggest one. I actually I have a thing that I do that we posted last week on LinkedIn, which is the 10 most common mistakes entrepreneurs make and how to avoid them.
Let's get that.
If you want to kind of go to the very beginning of the very end of that, I'm sorry, to the beginning of that one, it's don't feel that your value is self-evident. One.
Got it.
Two, don't think for 1 second, and I've heard this any number of times. Don't think for 1 second that you can compress a sales cycle. Ooh. Right? I've worked with CEOs that go, "We need a 30-day decision." No. The customer calls the tune of the music that we dance to, and if it's going to take them 60 days, it's going to take them 60 days, no matter what you do. No question. Another one is if you want sales talent, you got to pay for it. It's not a commodity. I did a podcast several months ago with a gent. I don't know if you know him by the name of Ian Selby, and he summarized what I said with that statement with is, yeah, you're right. If you're going to pay peanuts, all you're going to get are monkeys.
That's right.
And that's true. And then the last one is, no one can do this better than me. And when I do that presentation live and I get to that final slide and there are entrepreneurs in the room, it always elicits a laugh.
Yeah.
right? You've got, if to be successful, you got to build a team of people that have the skills that you don't have.
Yeah.
Those are the good entrepreneurs.
Yeah, critical, man. Hiring the right talent and then getting yourself out of the equation or focus on the things that you're really, really great at, your highest and best use of time. Right.
That's right. That's
So
right.
awesome, my friend. Well, I appreciate you. Great stuff today. I got a lot of notes. I'm excited to get this out, and we'll drop your links below for so people can connect with you as well as get a copy of your book. So again, thank you. Final question I ask everybody on the podcast is, what does path to mastery mean to you?
You know what? In doing research before this, what it means to me is, and I'm talking specifically
So you
about,
actually had to do research on that. I love
well, I
love it.
wanted to see. I don't like to come into these things blind and just shoot from the hip.
I can see that. And that's why you're good at sales, because you,
So
you do your homework.
I went in and watched some of your episodes, and regrettably, I could not find Brian Tracy, because as soon as I saw that,
It's
I'm like,
years and years ago, but yeah.
But for this podcast, I think it's interesting in that it's very diverse, and that there are lessons that can be learned from different market spaces and from the folks that operate in those market spaces that you might be surprised that can be applied in the space that you're in. Because to me, selling doesn't really change the process of, the evaluation and convincing something to buy something doesn't really change. It's just really the staging of it, and the stage props that change. But that actual process is the same, whether you're selling advanced technology or a home or whatever. It's the same. It's the same in the end when you reduce it to its essence.
100%. Well, I appreciate you, Don. Thank you. Great conversation. I'm looking forward to getting this one out, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
You take care. Enjoyed it.